All right. Well, let's get on to something a little bit lighter, and let's round out our evening with the movie review. And tonight, this week, the movie that we're going to be reviewing is Ben-Hur, in keeping with our Charlton Heston month.
God damn, it's good.
Yeah, it's really good. Alright, just a quick synopsis. Epic drama about an aristocratic Jew living in Judea who incurs the wrath of a childhood friend, now Roman tribune. Although forced into slavery on a galley and compelled to witness the cruel persecution of his family, he survives, harboring dreams of vengeance. A battle at sea and the chariot race are among the memorable sequences. The film used 300 sets of Roman Cinecittà Studios and won a record 11 Oscars.
Because this movie came out in 59, I believe.
59, yeah.
Yeah, this is still around the time where they would utilize they built giant sets.
Right, I think, yeah, that was one of the things I was just flabbergasted by. It's just the scale of it, and because it was before modern movie making techniques. They actually practically built a lot of the sets. The huge what is it? The huge Coliseum and the chariot racetrack and what essentially was the streets of Jerusalem. It was I was in awe of what they did.
Yeah,
and these are true epics in the literal sense of the word, epics.
Yeah, it's definitely a time in film that is way it's done. You're never going to see something like this again.
I mean, because one, it'd be the cost to do such a thing nowadays is astronomical.
Yeah.
But I mean, and two, it's just because progress happens. Film making techniques have improved, and we've gotten to the point where we're able to do these amazing things with green screen and and computer generated graphics. So building practical sets is not a non-starter, but man, you really do kind of lose something when you don't do when you don't do practical things.
Yeah, it's it's kind of like we can lament that's a time gone by, but I choose I'd like to go back and just watch those and just man, that would have been really cool to see how they put this all together, and it must have been, it's just nuts. It felt like the one thing I like about that stuff is you feel like you're there. It's not you're not in a movie. You're actually there with the characters in that time period or whatever world that they're creating.
Right. It seems it's very immersive. It's you're no longer watching a movie, but you're just experiencing it. I mean, it'd be kind of imagining, kind of creating the world as you're reading a book.
Exactly. So there's a couple of things that I noted about the film that I think are pretty interesting. There are some things that I was thinking of. I like that. So for people who have never seen this, and they're watching it at first, it starts off of the story of the birth of Christ, which is wait a second, I thought we were talking about Ben-Hur, Judah Ben-Hur. Why are we talking about Jesus? But the reason that was put in there is they were trying. Judah Ben-Hur was juxtaposed along with Jesus because they're around the same age, and there's even like later on in the film, there's a character who is looking for the Messiah, and when he sees Judah Ben-Hur at first, he's like, "Are you him? No, you're not him." And it's
Right,
like
because he asked, like, "Are you from Nazareth?" And wasn't he one of the wise men?
yes, I think he was.
Right, because he's like, "Oh, I was there at his birth, and I wanted to see him, again." I
So
think,
yeah, there is like this comparison to Judah Ben-Hur with Christ. So there is like kind of that comparison, and it also kind of tells the tale of like what's of that time, it's age, giving you the time period that this movie is set in by showing the birth of Christ, and like in Judea, and so you kind of get an idea as to what's happening from seeing that. And the other thing that's I found pretty interesting about the film is I couldn't help but thinking of the story of Joseph, along with Ben-Hur, and how
right,
he was against his will. He was thrust. He went from being very rich and prominent,
right.
and
He was considered a prince of the Jews. He came from a really well-off family, and then because of jealousy or just a hard heart, one of his best friend growing up, a Roman, because he wouldn't go along with his plans, betrays his friend. And actually, there. I mean, not just like the biblical kind of references. I felt there was a lot of other literary motifs that I found in this story, particularly the Count of Monte Cristo.
that's exactly right.
Mm-hmm.
Oh man, yeah,
But the whole kind of like parallel, kind of telling the parallel stories of Judah Ben-Hur and Jesus, it kind of felt like a little bit like Forrest Gump.
how do you make that comparison?
Well, it's just like kind of like similarly in the way that Forrest Gump is part of like these historic events. Almost similarly, Judah Ben-Hur is as well.
Okay, yeah, I can
Yeah.
see that. Yeah.
Yeah. Like one, like where they like their paths like intersect. Where when he's just about to be carted off to the galleys, and Jesus gives him a drink, and then when and then towards like going towards the latter half of the second act, and Judah Ben-Hur is there when Jesus gives his famous Sermon on the Mount and the Beatitudes.
Yeah, that's right. I almost forgot about that scene. It's like, yeah, he was there to witness the Sermon on the Mount.
Mm-hmm. And then of course he was there at the end at his crucifixion. So I'm not saying like it's a direct one-to-one comparison, but it's kind of like a similar aspect.
Right. Yeah. You see, there is that similarity. Yeah, that's a good point. So yeah, you have like the biblical elements, you have the cinematic elements that are there.
Mm-hmm.
It's got it all, man.
Mm-hmm.
And doing some after I watched it, this is probably like the third or fourth time I've watched this movie.
Mm-hmm.
But the reading up about it, so this was I forget who the author was, but this is actually a book from the 19th century, the story of Judah Ben-Hur, that this was adapted from. And this particular version of Ben-Hur is a remake of a silent film from 1925 of the same name. And a lot of the epics that we'll eventually talk about, I find a lot of them are actually remakes of these old silent films. Because whenever we get to like the Ten Commandments, that was a remake of a silent film. So there's a few of Hitchcock's films that like he remade some of his own films that were silent films, stuff like that.
The author of Ben-Hur: A Tale of Christ was Lew Wallace.
Thank you.
Yeah, and it was published in November 12th, 1880.
I'm actually kind of curious to maybe like take a look at that, read it and see how that book is. See like how close the movie matches up to it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, this movie is great. Yeah, I mean, of course, Charlton Heston brings it in his acting performance. I think everyone does. From like the guy who plays his best friend, Masala.
Yeah.
To
and then you have Esther was a great character.
Mm-hmm.
Simonides.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see. Who is the guy that ended up adopting Ben-Hur? That Roman soldier that he saved.
Yeah, the consul. Let me see. I think it was Quintus Arrius. Quintus Arrius, played by Jack Hawkins.
Yeah, when I think about this film, so you have the great soundtrack. You have great acting.
Oh yeah, the soundtrack was great.
I mean, there's several different acts to the film, but like this, not only is this like considered the epic, which is, but it's, this really did feel kind of like a stage play or an opera almost that you're watching,
right?
And it's. I mean, obviously, you even get that with like when it starts, you have the entrance music, and you have the intermission,
right,
and the epilogue.
Yeah, that intro was freaking long, dude. I kind of had to like skip forward.
Well, here's the thing: is like it harkens, doing that. It harkens back to like I said, to the old
right, the stage plays, and like gives people time to like file in and get their seats and all that.
Or even going to like back to the silent era when there would be like an organist or a band that would be playing music to go along with the movie itself. So it harkens back to like all that, and like another movie that had that too was we watched was it The Man Who Knew Too Much? It opened up with the band playing, and
hey, there was another one that we watched.
It might have been
like around the same time period.
Oh, Spartacus.
Yes, that's right, Spartacus.
Yeah.
Yeah, they had like one of the long intro tracks as well. It was good. Don't get me wrong, but
yeah,
very long.
I like stuff because you have a great soundtrack, you have great acting, you have the set design and the immersive experience that it creates. Yeah, and then along with the story itself is you're going on this long journey along with Judah Ben-Hur, and when he struggles, you're struggling along with him, and and when he makes his way back, it's like you're torn because you want him to get his revenge, yet at the same time, it's like you see him. The one thing that I like about Ben-Hur's character is you see him go from um, this very wealthy, magnanimous person, very an influence in his community, to beaten down slave who he's accused, mainly because he's accused of a crime he didn't do, yet like Joseph, every opportunity he makes, he tries to make like the good righteous decision. And when Quintus Arrius is like, when he kind of snuck up on him, it's like, you could have killed me if you wanted to. It's like, that's not why I'm here. It's, and you start to see that trust build with between him and Arrius.
Right, because I think because Arius starts kind of respecting him as a man, because before, like, there was this, because he would constantly refer to him as his number instead of his name, which is 41. So he was like, oh, 41, what are you doing here? Or 41, why do you work so hard? It wasn't until he Judah Ben-Hur demonstrates his character in saving his life. That he ultimately acknowledges him, and then also he demonstrates his character in when the emperor gives Arius Judah Ben-Hur as his slave, and he then begins his career as a chariot racer, and then demonstrating his character on the racetrack, to the point where he ends up adopting Judah Ben-Hur into his family.
Right. Oh, and here's the other thing too, is because you have Quintus Arrius, and then you have Messala, and Messala was trying to get Judah to kind of compromise himself, compromise his community, and it's like, we'll rule this area, we'll make it right, and you'll become a Roman citizen and all this stuff. But like, there was all this compromise that would have had to have taken place, whereas with Quintus Arrius, he was able to keep his dignity. He never compromised himself, and he still became a Roman citizen at the end. And so like you see like where the you kind of see like Quintus Arrius and Messala are kind of, you can see the contrast between those two characters as well, where at least Quintus Arrius is a much more righteous man.
Right, and I think it definitely lends like lets like, oh, not all Romans are painted with the same brush. It's like they're just like everywhere. There's they're good people and they're assholes.
Yeah, and the other thing too is that Quintus Arrius, like, he kept his word, and he gave his he recommended for the emperor to not like to give him his freedom, like that he was accused of this crime. He essentially pardoned him because like of this crime that like he did not do. Whereas Messala, just like, he kind of let him, he lied and didn't despite knowing the truth, like he let him and his family go into slavery or prison. So like I said, lots of no matter where you look, there's depth to like all the characters. There's depth to the story. It's oh man, it's great.
Couldn't agree with you more.
And I think of all the roles that we've seen thus far with Charlton Heston, this is definitely his best.
Agreed. Yeah. Absolutely. I mean, so far, what we've seen, I think Ben-Hur was his absolute peak.
Yeah, I mean, obviously we have a few more films to go, and that he's been in a lot of films. So I mean, this
Right.
opinion
This is
might
a very
change, but
small sample size.
right. But as of this moment, I would say this is one of his best. This is my favorite performance of his, and might be his best.
Just quickly, I would like to mention that kind of in like the spirit of how I think we coined the term cinematic archaeology, and like I just remember it's one of those things where I knew that I saw these scenes before, and like the scene like when he's like rowing in the galley in the Roman ship, and then also the chariot racing scenes. They're all very they're all like cultural like touchstones for me, in that I saw them but growing up. Funny enough, in like TV shows like Muppet Babies.
Right. Yeah.
Because I think Muppet Babies was really unique in that it used like actual footage from like movies, and tied it into the cartoon.
Right. Like when they were imagining things, like they would imagine like the these scenes from movies, and that was like their imagination. Like you had stuff like like the Star Wars, Little Shop of Horrors.
That's right.
Ben-Hur, Indiana Jones, like you name it, like it was.
Yeah.
And like the other thing too is like there's because I always go back to the Simpsons. Like the Simpsons use so many different like parodies of Ben-Hur like throughout like various episodes. Like you have
like the film festival one where Mr. Burns
he essentially creates his version of Ben-Hur like with him as
in the Jesus role. And he has Charlton Heston, Judah Ben-Hur character. It's like you really are the King of Kings.
What was it? The other one, it's I'm forgetting the title of the episode, but it's the soapbox derby race where it's like the race between like him and Bart and Nelson. It's the parodies the chariot race with.
That's right. Yeah, because that's right. Because Nelson has those.
The spiked wheels.
Yeah, and he chews up like the side of Martin's racer.
Right.
Yeah, I think they actually use. I don't know if they did. Tell me if I'm wrong. But do they use the sound, like some of the soundtrack, or am I just misremembering that?
Oh, I might have to. I think in the one with the film festival, I think they do use like, some sort of version of the soundtrack.
But in the soapbox derby one,
I have to go back and see on that one because I haven't seen that episode in a little while, so I might have to. I'll go back and watch it, and maybe I'll let you know.
Okay.
But sorry, I wanted to a point that I wanted to finish up though with the progression of Ben-Hur's character. Like I said, he goes from that prominent noble in his community to slave, and once but he's like through his time of slavery, he has this. Once Masala betrays him, he has this rage in him that he's like he wants vengeance, and actually to the point where the vengeance like it ate at him, and the woman that he loved, Esther, was saying, "It's like you're working so hard for this vengeance and this hate that you have, and you're becoming Masala essentially, and you're becoming just like him." And you start to see like where. And this goes back to the how the him and Christ are compared throughout this film, and you see how through hearing from the characters around Judah Ben-Hur who are affected by Christ's teachings and all this stuff, and it's like to to let go of that stuff, to love, even to love your enemy, and and through you start to see the softening of his heart and him becoming going from a Jew to becoming a believer in Christ, which it culminates at the end where after the crucifixion, his mom, his sister who contracted leprosy, they were healed because of Christ, and it's like after he saw Christ kind of carrying his cross, he recognized him and gave him water just as Christ had given to him all those years before.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, I think Christ obviously recognized him and used his power to bring healing to his family, because he probably saw everything that Jesus had gone through, his heart, all that stuff.
Right.
And
yeah, it's interesting because just before Christ gives the Sermon on the Mount, Judah Ben-Hur is talking to, what was this? Simonides. He was like, and he was talking about that time before he was about to be, carted off to the galleys. Someone gave him a drink. But he's talking about how it wasn't, it didn't fulfill him, and he's like still thirsty. And I couldn't help but think about what Jesus said about how people who drink from me will never be thirsty again.
Right.
But I think because even though Jesus was physically giving him water, Ben-Hur wasn't able to receive the spiritual water because of his the hardening of his heart at that time. Right.
Like I said, no matter where you look in this film, you're going to find some sort of depth or, and this is one of those films that I can't recommend highly enough, and you got to go watch it for yourself.
Absolutely.
Any other thoughts from you, Andy? That you want to bring up, or?
No, that's all I have to say about the movie.
Shall we give our ratings then?
Yes, we shall.
All right, I'll go first.
All right, go for it.
5 stars.
5 stars. Okay.
Yeah, this, like I said, this has everything. You got great soundtrack, great set design, great cinematography, great characters. It's got everything.
Okay.
A rare 5-star for me.
A rare 5-star for you.
Actually, to the point, this actually might be my number 6, film, sixth favorite film.
It's the sixth man. It's the sixth man in your top 5. Okay, yeah. I'm gonna give this a 4.5. Fair, completely fair. Not that I'm mostly I'm mostly nitpicking, and even the nitpicks aren't even that bad. But yeah, there's 4.5. Still a great movie. Still highly recommended.
You're going to hell, Andy.
I'm going to hell. It's how dare you offend our Lord?